And at 10, Henry. While Henry does ultimately perish thanks to the Fnaf 6 fire, he would have been a target for William beforehand, especially once he had learned who was actually committing the crimes at his restaurants. But why didn't William go after him? It would have been too obvious, really. I mean, there are 5 murders that occur inside the walls of the restaurant. They already suspect William for it, but then Henry goes missing and then William is left as the sole proprietor of the business. That's super suspicious and would definitely result in an arrest. Motive means an opportunity. Motive is absolutely there, especially if William was cheating with Henry's wife or something. Means would be fairly easy to find, and William has plenty of opportunities, let's be honest. So killing Henry would only result in William going to jail, which probably saved Henry's life. And at 9, Vanny. Vanny is an interesting case here, because while she is in a way a victim of glitch trap, she doesn't really know it, or at least is unable to communicate it, only being able to search help on the company computer. Not only that, but William could very well have killed Vanny, but he didn't, opting instead to gain partial control over her. So while she isn't a victim in the traditional sense, I'm sure that there are people who are willing to argue in the comments. So I'm going to make this simple. My list, my rules. Plus, this is a really hard list. There aren't many people who don't end up dying in the Fnaf universe, alright? So cut me some slack if a couple of these numbers are iffy to say the least. But Vanny has not yet suffered the ultimate fate of the forever naps, so I'm allowing myself to say that she was almost a victim. Does that mean she isn't going to die? No, I feel like she almost certainly will perish, but she hasn't yet, and that's good enough for me. And at 8, Sammy Emily. Another one that kinda fits if you squint at it and then cough a couple of times. Sammy Emily was in the first 2 Fnaf novels Charlie's twin brother who was kidnapped and killed by William Afton. We as the reader and Charlie believe this to be the case for the Silver Eyes as well as the Twisted Ones. However, in the 4th Closet, the 3rd and final book in the novel trilogy, we learn that there is no Sammy Emily, that instead Charlie was the one who was kidnapped and killed by Afton, and that for all these years every version of Charlie had been a robot designed by Henry and implanted with fake memories. So technically, since Sammy Emily isn't real, they aren't a victim. And if we want to get even more meta with it, they were almost a victim because Scott could have decided to let the story stay that way and not make Charlie a robot. But he didn't. Sure, Sammy could have been a real character. That, or if Sammy was real, they would have been a victim, meaning that since it didn't happen, they were almost a victim. Like I said, this list was hard, but I promise the next ones make more sense. And at 7, Lewis. Lewis was introduced in Fnaf AR through emails that he's lucky he's the only one seeing, and not HR. Lewis is a creepy coworker of Ness who works at IT, at the company creating all the robots for the Fazbear Entertainment delivery service that we experience in Special Delivery. And he's probably the creepiest damn character in the entire series. Honestly, I'm surprised he hasn't been killed, especially if Ness is indeed Vanessa and Vanny, since he seems to be on to their little scheme. He's intercepted search queries and emails that just make Ness seem off, and straight up like a serial killer. Didn't she order like realistic human masks at some point? Anyway, if William had seen these emails addressed to Ness, he would feel required to take matters into his own hands and get rid of the guy who keeps spying on them. Unless this would be a similar situation to Henry, where the cops would look at these emails and see that he was harassing Ness and then maybe take her in for questioning. I mean, it's a realistic scenario. Ness feels threatened or annoyed by Lewis and then just gets rid of him. People have killed for less. And the contents of those emails is only more incriminating. Like, who orders realistic human faces? Aside from me. And at 6, Indie Game Dev. The Scott Cawthon in-universe stand-in is an interesting character I hope they explore more in the future. But with Scott retiring, could this character meet a grisly fate? It could be that Fazbear Entertainment wants to tie up loose ends while trying to rebuild their reputation, or that maybe they threatened him into making the games in the first place, so they're keeping a close watch on him. I mean, if William learns about what this guy was making, maybe he would feel like he needs to silence the one man who knows too much, or strong-arm him into creating the games after he learned that he knew about the real story behind Fazbear Entertainment. It's entirely possible. It could also be that the indie game dev was the person the Fnaf 6 franchise owner job was for, since there was a way out plan for them, and Henry knew at least one other person that knew what was going on. But that person wasn't Michael, as we learned from the final speech, meaning that whoever that was almost a victim as well.
And to you, my brave volunteer, who somehow found this job listing not intended for you.
Halfway through in at number 5, William Afton. William does eventually kick the bucket, but even when his physical form dies, he comes back as sentient code in a video game, and isn't that the dream? Either way, this man narrowly avoids dying throughout the whole series. This man was possessed by a spirit that intentionally kept him alive through multiple instances that should have killed him, so I think if anything, this guy is the definition of almost victim. William doesn't even ultimately die until he allows himself to in the Fazbear warehouse in the man in room 1280, and even when his body explodes, he's still surviving through latching onto a hard drive that gets scanned into Help Wanted, and I have no doubts that he picked the one that would specifically be used or one that he instructed someone else to use when making the VR game. At least if the game was planned before his demise. Seriously though, William survived a spring locking, the Fnaf 3 fire, the Fnaf 6 fire, and the constant assassination attempts from the hospital staff, so this guy is for sure making it onto this list. And at 4, Kelsey. Kelsey, in essence, is the main antagonist to the Fazbear Frights story, the new kid from the third Fazbear Frights book, 1:35 AM. Kelsey had just moved to town and ends up making friends with the protagonist, Devin. Devin ends up getting jealous of how much everyone loves Kelsey, so he hatches a plan with his friend to trap him in a Springlock suit for a few hours. However, when they unleash their plan, the Springlock suit fails and kills Kelsey. At least, so they thought. Since a week later, Devin returns to make sure Kelsey is still there, only to find a different body in the suit. He knows it's someone else because the hair color's different. And then Devin gets stuck in the suit by his arm and bleeds out, only for the story to cut back to Kelsey meeting 2 more kids at his new school. This is an interesting story, because while Kelsey did get Springlock, he ends up being fine. So what happened? Some think that Kelsey's a ghost, some think that he's the one you should not have killed, others don't know. But either way, this version of Kelsey, the one who got into the suit, was nearly a victim that somehow survived or escaped. At least, so we think. Getting close to the end, and at number 3, us. We as the player in many of these games narrowly avoid death. Sometimes with ease, sometimes by the skin of our teeth, like in the Baby Night Terror level of Fnaf VR, where we are literally trapped in a closet that Baby could open at any time and kill us. Other times are less close, like if we see an animatronic right outside our window in Fnaf 1 and need to quickly close the door before it gets us. But either way, there is no denying that we in every Fnaf game are almost victims. Sometimes we even are victims, like in Fnaf 4 where we die thanks to William pulling the plug, or in Sister Location where he gets scooped and stuffed with Ennard, or Fnaf 6 where we willingly allow ourselves to be freed by the cleansing fire. No matter what, it's undeniable that we are some of the most resilient characters in the whole series. Normal people would see what they're up against and then quit day 1. And then when asked about it at their next interview, they would say haunted animatronics were trying to kill me, so I quit. Simple as that, no other explanation needed. But we, as the players, stick it out for a week. And instead of quitting, we get fired, because we know what we need to do, and that's pretty admirable. Penultimately, in at number 2, Jeremy Fitzgerald. Jeremy Fitzgerald is the character most assumed suffered the bite of 87, a moment that has been debated since the start of the Five Nights series. While yes, this Jeremy may lose his frontal lobe, he could have lost his life. And I don't know about you, but losing my frontal lobe and getting promoted to day shift and suing that company to get a boatload of money sounds a lot better than death to me. Especially since MatPack concluded that one of the only things that would happen would be your loss of self-preservation and fear. Now I have no idea what an entire frontal lobe being removed would do, but it still sounds better than death, which in my opinion makes this character almost a victim, since if that animatronic had moved even slightly, or Jeremy had been an inch closer, it would have been much worse than it was. Oh yeah. Finally, in at number 1, Casey. Casey's the main character in a Fazbear Fright story I don't know if I've really talked about in detail. I might have mentioned the story here and there, but I don't think there's been a whole number on it. Casey appears in the Fazbear Fright story Dance With Me from Step Closer, the 4th Fazbear Frights book. She ends up stealing some glasses that when worn either reveal or display a Ballora animatronic dancing. Honestly, this is the first character I put on this list and the reason I thought this list was possible, since this entire story revolves around how she was almost a victim of Ballora. Now don't get me wrong, the story is very unclear in this regard, but it's generally assumed that the ending does imply that the little girl who gets the glasses back got snatched by Ballora, who spent the entire story slowly getting closer to Cassie every time she put on those glasses. She returns the glasses to the woman who owns them, and when her daughter ends up putting them on, she's the one who starts dancing. And knowing this series, I highly doubt it's because she was excited to see a 7-foot-tall Ballora dancing right in front of her. Cassie was very nearly caught by Ballora, instead having a little girl take her place. That kid was probably a brat anyway though. I hope it was Brave. And at 10, Crying Child. Okay, so I'm putting this one at number 10 because I personally don't think that the Crying Child is a Springlock victim. To me, there's just no logical way that animatronic jaw should have crushed his skull, because, you know, the Springlocks were already active and that would require a lot of power to crush a skull anyway. However, it is possible that since this is a series about haunted animatronics possessed by spirit metal, that logic kind of gets thrown out the window. So assuming that he is a Springlock victim, that's brutally scary. Being thrown into an animatronic's mouth and crying so much that you make the jaw snap onto your own skull, killing you instantly? Holy crap, that is nightmare fuel. That's why some people are scared of robots or animatronics, and while it may not be realistic, the possibility of it happening is still horrifying to say the least, especially since not even that long ago he lost his sister to Circus Baby, and that's pretty messed up. And I'm sure that Michael, who put the kid in his mouth, as long as, you know, I'm wrong about my theory, he'd be scarred for life. And I think I would be too. Before we move on to number 9, can you do me a favor and smash that like button and subscribe if you haven't yet if you are looking forward to this list. I saw a load of comments asking for it, so this better not flop. If it flops, so help me, you will all have a reckoning. The more likes we get, the more likely we are to do a part 2, and it also helps us against the algorithm almighty and lets us grow the channel, which means more cool vids for you, so you know, it's a win-win, so thank you. And at 9, The Twisted Ones. The Twisted Ones novel starts a year after The Silver Eyes ended, with Charlie in university. One day, however, Clay Burke comes to see Charlie, and for some reason brings her to see a corpse with familiar wounds. This could either be because she would recognize them, or because she was working with the police, or because they had to advance the plot. I don't know, I haven't read the original novels, but I want to. However, looking at the wounds, she confirms that they are in fact a Springlock failure, meaning that we have an unnamed Springlock victim in the Twisted Ones novel. If this character does have a name, like if it's revealed in later down the line or something, please let me know, because I couldn't find one online. However, while this may seem insignificant to you, the real horror of this number comes from what it signifies. This Springlock marks the return of William Afton, since at the same time, Clay also tells her that a blood sample they took from Afton showed that the body was a fake, or at least it was fake blood. The return of a killer, and the purple guy of all of them, that's pretty damn scary if you ask me. And at 8, The New Kid. Continuing with the theme of Fnaf books, what about the story The New Kid from 1:35 AM, the third Fazbear Frights book? The story revolves around Devon, Mick, and Kelsey. Devon and Mick are outcasts. They aren't popular, they aren't cool, but when the new kid Kelsey arrives at their school, they make a new friend, despite Kelsey being charismatic and adored by everyone else in the school. Over time though, Devon grows jealous of Kelsey, since Kelsey has everything that Devon wants. So in an act of revenge or to gain control, because you know that's kind of serial killery, Devon hatches a plan to lure Kelsey to an abandoned Freddy Fazbear's to trap him in a Springlock suit for a couple hours, to try to humble him, I guess. But the plan goes horribly wrong. After getting in the suit, the Springlocks fail, as expected, because you know this is a Fnaf book, causing Kelsey's blood to soak into the fur of the animatronic and pool around the ground. Devon and Mick leave Kelsey for dead so that they won't get in trouble, but something doesn't feel right. So a week later, Devon returns to make sure that Kelsey's body is still there, for some reason. He sticks his hand into the animatronic's mouth to feel if it's there, and snap! The Springlocks fail yet again, as per usual, and Devon gets his hand stuck inside the suit and bleeds out, but not before seeing a body in the suit, but with black hair instead of Kelsey's blonde hair. If that's not scary, then you need to go see a doctor, because that's bone chilling. That's messed up. No. And at 7, Grim Fredbear. Grim Fredbear is one of the antagonists from Final Nights 3 Nightmares Awoken. He's only active on Night 5 and found in the left hallway. Grim Fredbear resembles the normal golden Fredbear suit, only with his suit glowing a deep purple while the interior of the suit glows a bright white. His upper face appears to be torn off, including his eyes, leaving an empty, hollow, gaping hole in its place. The inside of the mask, though it appears like there's nothing really inside, actually conceals a white, pale human head that can only be seen during his jump scare. And before you ask, yes, it's mine. The animatronic is clearly meant to be a reference to Shadow Freddy and the theory that the Shadow animatronics were Springlock victims, which was later confirmed by Scott to be false when stating that William was the only victim of a Springlock failure. And in the museum level, which unlocks after Night 5, it is revealed that Grim Fredbear is a Springlock victim, saying, quote, another Springlock failure victim, the second generation of Fredbear. And at 6, Grim Chica. The first Springlock victim in the Final Nights series, Grim Chica is a primary antagonist in Final Nights 3 Nightmares Awoken. Unlike others, she is not a Reaper animatronic. Grim Chica holds a strong appearance to the Springlock suit on the poster in the Night 3 cutscene, but her faceplates are very hard to spot and she's almost entirely purple. She really resembles Toy Chica. The glowing accents inside of her resemble a human corpse. She lacks a bib unlike the original Chica, and her overall body is very slim like the original Toy Chica, except for her hips, which appear to be much wider. Got the baby birth in hips. I regret that immediately. And she lacks shoulders or upper arms, with her forearms protruding from her armpits. Grim Chica is also revealed to be a Springlock victim in the museum level, saying, quote, "A victim of a Springlock failure, forever forced to haunt the suit she is wearing, now being manipulated by your sister and mother. Tried spray on tan, still very pale." Why is that so relatable to me? Like, no matter what I do, I'll always be pale and pasty. Not the whole being manipulated by your sister and mother thing. That's weird. But like, I'm okay with forever being pasty. However, I did rank this above Grim Foxy because, like, it's Chica. And look what they did to my girl Chica. I'm sorry, Mommy Kentucky, for the transgressions. Halfway through in at number 5, Garvey. A psychopathic, cold-blooded killer. He stopped being human long ago. That's how Garvey is described in the extras of Dormitibus, the game from which he hails. Garvey is the penultimate antagonist of Dormitibus, and as a human, he was the man who murdered the missing children. He later went on to get trapped in Spring Bonnie, becoming Springtrap, and then was burnt to a permanent death in the Fazbear Frights fire. Garvey is a more gory version of Springtrap from Fnaf 3. However, he is not William Afton, as the game was released before the name reveal, even before Fnaf 4. Springtrap, but with hardly any exosuit or animatronic casing, whatever you want to call it. He crawls on all fours and uses his left hand as a foot and his left foot as a hand, like some demonic monkey from hell that Satan didn't sanction the creation of. Just look at this thing and tell me that it shouldn't be on this list. If you do, you'll be lying. And at 4, Golden Call. As a human, when alive, Golden Call's name was Kyle. However, he is now a Springlock victim stuck inside a Golden Freddy Springlock suit. Golden Call has the typical rundown Springlock suit vibe, similar to Springtrap. However, this is even more gruesome. His left ear is bent, he has guts coming out of basically every hole in his body, human eyes are hanging out of the animatronic's eye sockets. He's even missing exosuit on his right foot, and the character is holding a flesh-colored, at least it's flesh-colored, it may be even like fully like a flesh, phone in his right hand that stays stuck to his head via more flesh or blood strands connecting to the side of his head. It's horrifying, dude. This is a monstrosity. And looking at his age on the wiki, Kyle was only 5 when he got Springlocked, which is absolutely nuts and just flat out horrible. So unfortunate, man. He was supposed to be the next best Fortnite player. That's a joke for the long-term subs. You know it. And at 3, Am I Real? Am I Real, also known as Cake Bear, is presumably the primary and most recurrent antagonist in Dormitibus. Am I Real has 2 different forms. His first form is Cake Bear. Cake Bear's design originated from the Save Him minigame, where he delivered cake to children while a kid is murdered outside. He is the predecessor of both Fredbear and Freddy Fazbear. Cake Bear is a brown bear animatronic that also acts like a Springlock suit that appears in most of the main nights. Although they do look similar, the only similarities he has to Freddy Fazbear in reality is that they both possess a top hat, are brown, have blue eyes, and are a bear. Am I Real's second form is a form that resembles Springtrap, however. This form has a green color much like Springtrap and contains human remains. His right eye socket has gotten bigger on the side and a big hole can be seen on the right side of his head. His top hat has received some withering on it as well, and his lower jaw is slanted and worn down, no longer circular like Cake Bear's. He also has a sizable hole in the right side of his torso, revealing organs. Ha, lovely. Rips and tears cover his arms, revealing more human remains. He also appears to be missing at least 1 finger on his right hand, and it's absolutely terrifying to look at. Of course, 3 out of 10 of these are going to be from Dormitibus. Like, what did you think was gonna happen? Did you watch the Dormitibus animatronics list? Penultimately, in at number 2, Springtrap. I believe we all know this story by now. Everything was going well at first. They couldn't pin him down and he was on his way to immortality. Once William discovered Remnant, however, he spiraled. He wanted to use it to fuel his life and make himself truly immortal. So in an effort to study it further, William lures possessed animatronics to the back room that they can't access and uses it to dismantle dismantle them, planning to melt down their endoskeletons to make soul-infused metal. However, by doing this, he unknowingly releases the souls of the victims he claimed oh so long ago. Shocked, he tries to scare them by getting into his spring body suit, which also coincidentally makes him feel more powerful. However, this haste coupled with the leaking in the back room causes the spring locks to fail, crushing him in torturous agony for the next 30 years. However, he didn't die from this. As we learn in the man in room 1280, he was being kept alive by the spirit of another victim. So he was living that agonizing pain for 30 years, and that makes him damn well deserving of the number 2 spot. And before you ask, no, him and Garvey are 2 separate characters, meaning that they can both be included on this list. You're welcome. Finally, in at number 1, you. A spoiler alert for a fan game, and if I say which fan game, it's going to spoil it. So if you want to avoid spoilers, click away now. And thanks for watching. I'll give you a chance to do that now. Okay, now that you've prepared for spoilers, A Shadow Over Freddy's is a Fnaf fan game created by Fnaf on GameJolt. It released on April 25th, 2018, and since it was made by the same guy who is currently working on Fnaf Plus for the Fazbear fanverse, you know it's bound to be good. The gameplay of A Shadow Over Freddy's is a hybrid between a traditional point-and-click game and a free-roaming horror game. The player wakes up to find themselves with no memories in a black and white abandoned Freddy Fazbear's Pizza and is tasked with surviving 5 nights in escaping the restaurant. The player is given a different task each night and must complete said task before 6 AM and without being attacked by any roaming animatronics. However, the ending of the game has you getting trapped in a Springlock suit and left to rot, meaning that you are a Springlock victim, which is probably the scariest victim of them all, cause I don't know about you, but I'd rather not get Springlocked. Although I know there are plenty of you that would just love that. You'd fill the suit with liquids that aren't blood, and that's messed up. Like, I'm not one for kink shaming, but yeah, there's kinks, and then there's like being killed, you know? I don't know how else to put that. In at 10 to Rockstar Row. During the so-called interrogation and torture scene in Parts and Service, or at least that's what people are calling it, based on the titles of videos on YouTube, Vanessa questions Freddy about Gregory and accuses Freddy of helping us, which I mean is true, but she shouldn't even have to accuse him. More on that later. After telling him that she's gonna leave him down there until he can get put on a new endo, which doesn't really make sense if his coding is the issue and not the endoskeleton itself, why would she leave to Rockstar Row through Roxy's lift? Why? When she could have easily just come our way and head into the main atrium. That's where Gregory is for the majority of the game, and that's where all the animatronics are patrolling and have been spotting him. It would make more sense to go there than to Rockstar Row, where he was seen maybe twice at this point. Like, I don't know, it seems weird to me. I don't understand. Maybe like the whole logic behind this is that since all the animatronics are out in the atrium, she doesn't need to be there, or maybe she needs to be somewhere where she can get to her Vanny suit quickly, but I don't know. Even if it is Vanessa taking over and not like glitch trap at this point, I still don't get why she wouldn't just go to the atrium. In at 9, Bag of Rocks. Before Vanessa leaves Freddy in Parts and Service, okay, she says that it's so that his casing can be put on a new endo after they probably have someone on the clock who can do it normally. But then after that, she doesn't seem to be suspicious that he's walking around in front of her maybe within like 3 minutes. What? Who would have repaired him if not for, like, if it wasn't Gregory? There's literally no other human in the Pizzaplex, or at least that's alive at this point, and you know, Freddy can't really do it himself. The whole cylinder thing is to protect humans. There are no staff bots in this section, and the only reason that you had to leave him was because nobody else was working. Hello? You there, McFly? Like, why would Vanessa be so chill about Freddy just like walking around in front of her? She literally left him with his head removed, and now she's like, what, assuming that he somehow did it himself, which is literally impossible as he was strapped down. Even if he had done it himself, why wouldn't she see him and then confine him to his room, especially after just accusing him of helping to protect Gregory? Okay, it's something that confuses me like so much, and I found it weird in my first playthrough, so I figured that if we got close to Vanessa, she would pull us out of Freddy, but Like, I walked up to her to test it and nothing. She gave absolutely zero shits. Like, why? She's dumber than a bag of rocks at this point. It would have been so easy just to make like that little modification to her code for at least this part of the game. Like making her a little bit more dangerous if she saw Freddy, but no, they didn't. In it, a princess quest. The whole reason princess quest is a thing in this game was to lock Vanessa away in her brain and prevent her from regaining full control over her body. So why did William create or allow for the creation of a fail-safe in this system that allows her to escape? I mean, like, sure, they didn't expect a kid to come along and figure it out maybe, but first of all, it's an arcade machine, of course I'm gonna goddamn play it, but also given the track record of literally all of your plans, you'd think that Afton would have smartened up after like 40 years at the very least, but he doesn't, okay? It's like having a self-destruct button on the bomb that you plan to use to blow up Gotham City, okay? Or like it's like, I don't get it. It's like if the Joker had a purify water supply button just on him or something, okay? It's dumb. If you want something to work, why give it a way to fail? Or maybe that's just my brain and my perfectionism talking, but again, it's one of the dumbest things that Afton has actually ever done in the series. Like, canonically it doesn't backfire somehow, but that's aside the point. Like, but seriously, why would you have a way to undo your evil plans? A 4-year-old can do this. The fact that this wasn't the canon ending is actually just insane how that didn't happen. Just bury the third machine, at least, goddamn. Like, if that's the intention behind it, just bury it and leave it, okay? Fill it with concrete and leave it. Jeez. And it's 7 stealing security badges. Not only is Gregory just a really weird kid in general who wears Fazbear merch but also doesn't know that Chica loves pizza, he's also a thief. This guy steals so many things from the Pizzaplex, not even including all the little gift boxes that you can find around that are only optional. He also steals the security badges and ends up getting enough to have level 7 clearance as like a 4-year-old or a 6-year-old or however old he is, okay? It's really unclear. Because like he can't ride the go-kart alone and he can fit inside of Freddy's chest cavity, but he can also speak full sentences with proper grammar and stuff, okay? I have no idea how old he actually is, but he is still able to gain level 7 clearance. But like, how are they so readily available for him to steal? And how is it that taking these badges always triggers some event that makes everything worse for him? Like, how are the security guards supposed to like use these badges if that's what happens every time they take it? Or, an even better question actually, how are these security badges laying around in special containers when security should just have their pass with their clearance level on it, like on their belt? Okay, I don't get it. Plus, how does gaining multiple level 1 passes end up adding up to a level 8 clearance? That's all, it's still all level 1, okay? I don't get it. It makes absolutely no sense, and it's almost as if they set it up for him to see how long it would play out or something, or how well he would do. I don't know. And it's 6 fire. Okay, so during the true ending, otherwise known as the Afton ending or the Burn Trap ending or whatever the hell you want to yell at me for not calling it ending, we have to fend off Burn Trap's attempts to take control over Freddy by setting him on fire using what I'm guessing are the mechanisms that Henry uses to set the fire in Fnaf 6, since this is the same location. However, it's incredibly convenient how we fall into the room that has all of this stuff in it, that it has the monitors set up connected to the cameras in the various rooms that Burn Trap enters exclusively, with buttons that light the fires in the corresponding room that like has the camera on the monitor. Yeah, despite it being far more convenient for Henry to light all of them at the same time, I don't get how this works. Plus, I mean, like, if you think about it, how are these still working? It's clearly been a while, and some of the comments report that the Pizzaplex has been open for at least 4 years, which I don't know if it is accurate because, I mean, it's the YouTube comments. But if it is, these cameras and old-ass computers are still working 4 years after being set on fire that was enough to ruin the building. Not to mention also falling into a sinkhole that would have had to open up underneath it since we have to travel down an elevator to actually get into this section of the pizza place. How is all of this still working after all of that? And if you say that it was Vanny, that even adds more questions. Like, why make sure the fire systems are working and then they're set to being separate buttons? Plus, why have the computer monitors set up to look at the right area? I don't get it. And how are these these computer monitors are literal dinosaurs. How did they work before the fire, let alone after it? This is the kind of thing that demonstrates the line between luck and intent, because there was no way this many things lined up for him, excluding plot armor, because we kind of need to ignore protagonist syndrome for this entire list. But still, if this was just happening, that would not happen. Never. No way. Halfway through into number 5, Ice Cold Captive. Gregory in the Faster Blast ending actually orders the robots to disassemble Vanny, since she just ordered them to disassemble Freddy. But like, disassembling a robot and a human are two very different things. Okay, trust me, I would know. I'm surprised the robots even listened to him. Adding on to that, the fact that Gregory is willing to kill Vanny here, it's pretty messed up, especially given that like most people assume that he's 10 or 11, which doesn't really seem to make sense. Either way, you could argue that he doesn't know any better, but clearly he does. Okay, this kid is able to destroy all 3 animatronics without a moment's hesitation, use their upgrades on Freddy, he's willing to kill Vanny despite seemingly knowing her like we see in the best ending, and then he burns Springtrap multiple times to make sure he doesn't take over Freddy. Okay, what the living hell is this kid doing? Like, how was he raised? How is he so nonchalant about literally doing all of this? This guy kills Vanny and then only gets emotional when he has to go talk to Freddy, who is destroyed. Dude, Vanny is bleeding out not 3 feet from you. She is torn to shreds and you're crying over a robot that can be fixed? Something isn't right about this kid. He's supposed to be the captive here, but he's the one putting everyone else in danger, I swear. In it for recharge. What's the deal with airplane food and Glamrock Freddy and needing to recharge every 5 minutes, okay? Like, in the game sense, time isn't moving when I'm running around for 5 hours, since I haven't actually progressed the story. So if this animatronic is supposed to need to recharge every hour only, why is this such an issue? And why does he only use power when we're actually piloting him like a mech? If this is the case, shouldn't this man also be losing power when we summon him to grab us from the 3rd basement floor? Like, what? Why not? And why does he need to recharge but seemingly all the other animatronics don't? I never see Chica, Roxy, or Monty in a recharge station. Okay, even if you are around when they should be, when the hour hits. Okay, it's stupid, it's confusing, and it doesn't make any sense. It's almost like Freddy is doing this to us on purpose, either because he thinks that it's funny, or maybe he really is working for Vanny, but needs to gain our trust and make excuses for why he can't be around us all the time, so that he can just go and give her the information, or why he can't just why we can't hide inside of him all night, okay? There's something fishy going on with this animatronic, and I swear in the next game we're going to figure out that he betrayed us off screen. Or at least in the DLC we're going to figure that out. Getting close to the end, into number 3, Destruction. And isn't it convenient that there is a way to break every other animatronic that isn't Freddy? Okay, that leaves the animatronic broken in such a way that we can remove whatever aspect we actually needed to upgrade Freddy? Hell yeah it is. It's so convenient, in fact, that there is somehow a way to break them that just works perfectly for their personality, and the perfect amount of the animatronics as well. That works the first time. And even with Chica, okay, we push her into a goddamn trash compactor and somehow don't get crushed ourselves despite her grabbing onto us and pulling us with her. We only get pulled down into another area of the Pizzaplex that we can still get back to the Pizzaplex through, and you know, we weren't pulled into a thing that crushed our skulls. So yeah, needless to say that looking at this logically, it makes absolutely zero sense that any of this actually happened. Okay, we didn't even need to crush the animatronics, and instead we could have just chilled in Freddy's room until 6 a.m. when the doors opened. And ultimately, in at number 2, staying until 6. Speaking of which, Glamrock Freddy straight up encourages Gregory to risk his life in order to get out of the Pizzaplex, when in all honesty, the safest thing to do would have just been to keep him in your stomach or in your green room until 6 a.m. Especially after the door closes and he was definitely stuck, which just, it makes no sense whatsoever if Freddy is really meant to be protecting Gregory. There was no need for the whole daycare secret escape hatch thing. You could have just gone back the way you came and everything would have been fine. You wouldn't have been suspicious, since you would have at least appeared to be like you listened to Vanessa after you saw her in the healing area and went actually back to your room, and then Gregory would have been safe, especially after you knew that there was some crazy bunny running around the pizza place looking to slaughter him. So yeah, if Glamrock Freddy is like supposed to be protecting him, he did a horrible job at protecting this kid. Okay, I don't understand. You can think of all the excuses you want for him, but if Gregory had just waited in Freddy's green room, everything would have been fine. That's it. That's period. And finally, in at number 1, probable betrayal. I know that nobody wants to believe me on this, okay? We all want to hold out hope that finally one of the animatronics is going to be good and trying to help us, but Glamrock Freddy, after everything on this list, is almost certainly evil and just waiting for the perfect moment to strike. We've made a whole video about that, okay? And now, honestly, this one is kind of about that too. This guy makes some hella sketchy choices throughout our entire time at the Pizzaplex and only makes things worse for us. He takes us to get healed despite us saying no and having a limited time to leave, which ends up making us get locked inside the Pizzaplex. We also just sit in the booth and don't actually get healed, by the way, okay? He was unable to access the main Pizzaplex network despite having no reason to be disconnected, since at this point he wasn't suspected of helping us. And after Vanessa leaves Freddy without his head and parts in service, she sees him fully reassembled in less than 5 minutes and doesn't question it, like I said. Almost as if it was the plan the whole time. There's no way that he could have been put back together normally, and they just don't care, okay? The only way that this makes sense, any of this makes sense, is that if Freddy is secretly evil, and maybe even he doesn't know it. Maybe Afton is like in the back of his mind just like waiting to come forward. And at 10, Springtrap. Now this number is really meta and that's why it's starting off the list. But this isn't a metaphorical or philosophical number as if you thought it was going to be. Springtrap has literally killed other versions of himself in the Fazbear Fright story of In the Flesh from the 5th Fazbear Frights book Bunny Call. After Matt hadn't play tested a VR game he was working on for a few days called Springtrap's Revenge, he came back to find piles of dead Springtraps that the AI had somehow spawned in order to have something to kill. It's absolutely horrifying and it's just plain weird. Like, why would you spawn more versions of yourself in order to have something to kill? Like, isn't that just like a paradox? Like how you physically are unable to prevent yourself from being born, since if you do, you fade out of existence, but then you can't go back and prevent it. So like, you can't stop yourself from being born because then you can't stop yourself from being born. I mean, well, depending on what theories about time travel that you believe, whether you believe Back to the Future or Endgame. That also makes it impossible for your younger siblings to prevent you from being born, but the older ones can prevent the younger ones because they'd still be alive before you were conceived. So watch out, Jordan. And at 9, Hudson. Hudson is the protagonist of What We Found, the 3rd story in the 8th Fazbear Frights book Gumdrop Angel. Hudson has short blonde hair with a pale beard and blue eyes. He also has straight white teeth. He has bruises and burns all over his body. He's 6'1" and skinny. Almost like me, except my teeth aren't white and I'm not 6'1", and I don't have a beard. But I have blue eyes and I'm skinny. Hudson is a security guard at the upcoming horror attraction of Fazbear's Fright. His life up to this point has been filled with nothing but tragedy. His father committed suicide and his mother remarried a man named Lewis who would physically abuse Hudson at nearly every chance he got. He also became the main target for bullies who would hold his head down while flushing a toilet. Hudson began to fail school, and instead of trying to help him, the teachers would instead call him names and tell him that he's dumb. Gotta love the public school system, am I right? The story would later reveal that Hudson's family home burned down with Lewis and his mother inside, killing them. While Hudson does burn in an oven at the end of the story, he was in essence driven there by Springtrap, who was the main antagonist of the story. So still a Springtrap victim. By the way, Hudson was also the one who set the fire that killed his mom and Lewis, so. And at 8, Jeremy. There aren't many glitch trap victims, so we can't really do one of those lists. But since Jeremy from Fnaf VR was driven to suicide by Glitch Trap, who is William Afton's code form, I think it's close enough to deem a Springtrap killing. Jeremy from Fnaf VR is the game tester who tested the game before Tape Girl, and is the one who Tape Girl found after he cut off his face using a guillotine paper cutter. This was thanks to William invading Jeremy's mind through the use of the VR game, which is still confusing to me, since unless you were connected in some form of Sword Art Online haptic suit, it shouldn't really be possible. We're only seeing the game with our eyes, not plugged in like the Matrix, but I don't know why I'm bothered by it. I mean, I'm literally talking about a game series where a man possessed by the spirit of a child exploded after somehow communicating while comatose, had then used his intense agony to possess a hard drive that then gets scanned to create an AI that allows this man to continue living. So I don't know why I'm getting caught up in semantics, honestly, but yeah. Jeremy. And at 7, Vanny. Vanny is the planned main antagonist of the next FNAF game, Security Breach. There is not much we know about Vanny, but there are plenty of theories. Some believe Vanny to be the glitch trap controlled version of Vanessa, which would make sense. Some also believe that she was the girl who recorded the tapes in FNAF ER, aptly referred to as Tape Girl, who I literally just mentioned, which would also make sense. And while both of these are probably true, even if they aren't, somehow Vanny did fall under William's control, which in essence makes her a Springtrap victim, even if it was Glitch Trap who was controlling her. But he also would have manifested in that suit because he didn't want to relive the agony of being spring-locked, so he was still basically Springtrap. Look, this was a hard list, okay? And I had to add this number at the end. I had to add it so that I had 10 points, okay? So chill for a minute and let me do my thing. And at 6, Charlie. Okay, so in a way, Charlie in the Twisted Ones novel is a victim of Springtrap. And by in a way, I'm gonna have to suspend my disbelief because she was still a robot. While the original Charlie was killed by William Afton, in the Twisted Ones, one of the 4 robotic versions of Charlie gets snatched by a twisted animatronic and gets killed. Which only makes things more confusing when another version of Charlie, who is much older, shows up. But that's not the point. The point is that at this point, William had become Springtrap, and the twisted animatronics were his invention. So while yes, she was a robot, she was still a sentient robot who got snatched by an Afton creation after he had become Springtrap, so that's good enough for me. This was, like I said, actually harder than I thought it was going to be. William doesn't do much killing after becoming Springtrap, because he's locked in a room for 30 years. Most of the damage was already done at that point, so please forgive a few leaps in logic or suspension of disbelief, please. Thank you. Halfway through into number 5, Matthew. Remember how earlier I talked about how Springtrap was killing himself in the Springtrap's Revenge VR game in the Fazbear Frights book Bunny Call? Well, not only does he do that, but he also tears the main character Matthew to shreds. Now, some do consider this Matthew to be a reference to MatPat of game theory, and it makes sense why. But what makes this bad is that the community considers this an M-Preg fanfiction, which I have to say, I enjoyed not knowing what that was until I had to ask my sister about it because it was everywhere online. She's really into fanfiction, it's kinda concerning. Anyway, basically Matthew in this story gets implanted with a baby Springtrap thanks to a program called itsaboy.exe, which literally ends up tearing him to shreds from the inside out. Hardly a fun experience, I would say. Yet some women go their whole lives wanting to give birth and have kids. But I mean, at least most of the time, they don't kill you from the inside out. Or rather, they don't usually claw at you and dig through your stomach. That's exclusive to Springtrap, I hope. And at 4, Henry. Henry is another case that is kind of like victim adjacent, and not in a sense where he was a victim because he killed Charlie like I said last time, but rather because Henry lets himself die in FNAF 6 in order to ensure that nobody remembers what William did. However, William does end up escaping, but Henry stayed put and let himself burn in the FNAF 6 fire because of Springtrap, and then it turned out that it was all for nothing, because nobody is standing in his way anymore. So honestly, while not directly killed by Springtrap or William, Henry is one of the biggest victims that William has. He took his family and his life, all for nothing, since it didn't actually put an end to his reign of terror. But maybe, like the ultimate custom night Samurai Freddy cutscene suggests, maybe Henry is also still alive, possessing an object looking to come back to keep pursuing that anime fox. At least, I wouldn't be surprised if Henry turned out to be Glamrock Freddy or something like that. Getting close to the end, and in number 3, Gregory. Now, with Security Breach not releasing until late 2021, we can only speculate as to what happens to our next main character and our player, Gregory, in the next Fazbear game. However, it's entirely possible that Gregory ends up getting killed. Think about it. This is literally a kid who is fighting one of the FNAF universe's deadliest child serial killers, who has multiple animatronics out to find him and control over a security guard. Not only that, but it's entirely possible that Glamrock Freddy ends up betraying us and crushing us while we're inside of him. That sounded weird. It's not like we haven't been killed in the games before, or at least horribly mutilated like we were in Sister Location. And we as the player die in FNAF 6 along with Henry. So Scott is not new to killing off the main player in his games. But also, realistically, he's a kid. And like, what's he gonna be able to do against a literal sentient code? And if he lives, there will be someone to tell the cops what happened. And if William was paying them off, he certainly wasn't anymore, so maybe they can have an actual investigation this time. But only if Gregory lives, so he's probably gonna die. Penultimately in at number 2, Michael Afton. Now this may be confusing to some of you since Michael doesn't die until Fnaf 6, but come on, this guy is the biggest Springtrap victim of them all. Let's just recap what happens to Springtrap's own son, for God's sake. He kills his brother, assuming that's actually what happened. He then learns about his father's killing spree and tries to right his wrongs. While doing so, he is haunted by the spirits of the children his father has killed, and then learns about how his sister has possessed an animatronic after getting scooped so many years ago. Then he learns that he is probably a robot and gets ripped open by a scooping machine. After this, a giant robot amalgamation of parts fills his body and lets him bruise and rot while wearing him like a suit after Barney Stinson had a mental breakdown, and then he vomits that entire animatronic back out. Can you imagine how painful that would be? The 7-foot tall mass that is entered coming out of your throat. But somehow, he's still alive. Then he finds a job posting about a new Fazbear location and applies for it, but then has to salvage animatronics that include the thing that ruined his body, his long dead sister, one of his father's earliest victims, and his father, all of which may kill him if he's not on high alert. This man has suffered probably the most in the entire series. That's absolutely horrifying. Finally, and at number 1, William Afton. Yes, here we are again. While I already said Springtrap himself as the first number, I'm gonna round it off with some more self-reflection. Like I said, this list was hard. However, the most important victim Springtrap could have had would have been William Afton himself. Let's remember, Springtrap isn't a separate character. He is the body of William Afton that got springlocked after he hastily put on his murder costume in the back room of an early Fazbear location after accidentally releasing the souls of his original victims. Whether it was to make them feel scared or to make himself feel more powerful, his haste coupled with the moisture from the leaking ceiling caused the springlock mechanisms to fail, shooting thousands of metal parts deep into his body. It would have killed him if not for the spirit that had possessed him that was intentionally keeping him alive. That's brutal. I mean, he absolutely deserves it, don't get me wrong, but that has to be included on this list. I mean, I was told that William should have been on the purple guy victims list, so there you go. Here he is.